What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, you know, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching it, well, since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. ERICH von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with ERICH his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. ERICH von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show. And I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Len Kasten. Now, Len has a BA degree from Cornell University, where he majored in psychology and minored in literature and philosophy. Now, after graduating from Cornell, he entered the US Air Force Aviation Cadet Program. Now, while in the Air Force, he experienced a UFO encounter that had a transformative effect on his life, although he didn't realize it until a few years later on. Now, he has spent frequent trips to Virginia Beach and a lot of time in the extensive New Age library at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, the ARE. This is the organization founded by psychic Edgar Cayce, where he acquired a self-education in metaphysics and much more. Well, Len Kasten, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kevin. Nice to be with you.
It's great to have you on, Len. Really, some scope of work here you've got. You've got a large scope of work. Just very briefly, just how did you get involved or interested in this phenomena?
Well, it all started while I was in the U.S. Air Force many years ago. I had an experience. I guess I would call it a contact, and I think it wasn't really in the category of an abduction, although some might say it was. I woke up in my barracks room at 3 o'clock in the morning without any explanation, which I never do, and ran to the window just in time to look out to see a craft speeding by at a very high speed, at a very high rate of speed, and it was glowing green and gold phosphorescence. And I put my face up against the window and I watched until it disappeared out over the Gulf of Mexico. And then I went back to sleep. My roommate laid there. He was undisturbed, so he didn't evidently have any interruption. The next morning, the tower operators came in and they were talking about having had UFOs on the radar that night over the runway. And I said to them, "What is a UFO?" At that time, I had no idea what a UFO was. And they explained it, and then said, "You should go report what you've seen to the UFO office." I said, "Okay." I found a UFO office. Sure enough, there was such an office. And there was a captain sitting there with a multi-page questionnaire. This was part of Project Blue Book at that time. And he asked me many, many questions, asked me about how fast I thought it was going. I thought perhaps it might be going 5,000 miles an hour. I don't know. It seemed to be that way anyway. Anyway, he wasn't surprised at all. And I thought that was the end of it. The next day I got very sick. Flu-like symptoms. I had them for about 3 days. I was in the base hospital for that period of time. And all I asked them for was grapefruit juice for some reason. I don't know why. Possibly because my immune system had been somehow compromised. And I wanted a strong dose of vitamin C. In any case, I found out later that type of illness is not uncommon for abductees who have been on board the craft. And putting it all together, now, as I look back on it, I realized that what happened, I had probably been taken on board the craft, and at 3 o'clock, when they dumped me back into my bed, is when I ran to the window and looked out to see it go away. So that seems to have been what started it, because about 3 years later, while working in Washington for IBM, I felt motivated to join NICAP, which was a rather obscure organization at that time, National Investigative Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And ever since, I've been involved.
Wow, okay, so did you ever get any regression on that event in the barracks?
I never have, but I'm planning on having that done in August by somebody who I trust and whose abilities I admire.
Now, isn't that going to be interesting?
It will be.
Yeah,
it will definitely be interesting. I'm very anxious to find out what happened.
Yeah, and what connection, maybe at a soul level, you'll have with those that abducted you.
Exactly. That's my question. That's my main question. I'm very sure they were good guys.
Yes. Yes.
I'm quite positive, because it motivated me to get involved in a good way.
Yes.
And I'm convinced of that.
Now, okay. So, in between joining that organization, leaving the barracks, and it's it's quite common for sightings to take place over military bases.
Right, especially Eglin Air Force Base, which was an experimental base and had a very, very large area in which they tested new devices, new planes. So Eglin was particularly of interest too.
And at that time, between the experience that you had and joining the organization, where does the ARE, the Edgar Cayce Foundation, fit into all this?
Well, when I got out of the Air Force shortly thereafter, I felt moved to Virginia Beach, and I got involved with the Cayce people, and I spent many, many hours in their library, and got a self-education in metaphysics and a lot of things, and filled in a lot of gaps. I seemed very hungry for that type of information.
Yes, yeah. Well, going to that kind of place will feed that appetite most definitely, and it's I'm off over there actually, hopefully in December. To the ARE, and we actually host their weekly show, Reflections, The Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We actually produce it for them online, so I know the guys very well.
Oh, okay, good. That's great. Yeah, it's a great organization, and it's managed to maintain its prestige over many, many years now.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not that many people in this game that I know that combine the spiritual or the consciousness, really, the consciousness aspect of this, with the nuts and bolts. But you do.
I do, and when I moved to Boston shortly thereafter, I found myself joining the Theosophical Society. Again, an organization that was involved with metaphysics rather than with, as you say, nuts and bolts. So I was getting both sides of the picture for some reason. Again, whatever motivated me, I have no idea. Because my education was in liberal arts. I had no exposure to anything UFO wise or even metaphysical up until that point.
Yes. And I think you would say that, let's just stick with the good guys for now. You would say the good guys are non-interventional, and there will be contact on a mass scale, potentially, and I hope I'm not taking your words out of context here, potentially, when our consciousness is ready for it, when we're at the right level of consciousness as a mass planet.
I think so, yes. I think that's the key. I think that is the key, because right now we are in the situation of being dumbed down by certain forces to keep us from raising our consciousness. But once we do, I think they will contact us openly.
Yes, absolutely. And do you? There's so many people in this field that have a lot of notoriety, in a sense, always at the same conferences, yet they're not really combining what you are. Do you find that annoying, that you, or not annoying, but does that pain you at all, that you have this truth and there's not many others in this field that share that same feeling? Or always...
Well, I'm meeting quite a few of them. Look, overall we're covering all the bases. It doesn't matter who specializes in what, as long as a group, we're covering all the important information. And some people specialize. People like Stanton Friedman, who are more nuts and bolts. He's a very important guy, nevertheless.
Absolutely,
extremely important. It has been for 50 years. It does not matter that he has no background in metaphysics. It has no bearing on the subject at all.
No, but the framework that we're looking at it with, that most people look at it with, it seems to be there's a much bigger framework to the whole UFO phenomena that we are actually right now not even aware of, that actually our understanding of what it's all about is actually not what it's about.
That's true. There are many, many misunderstandings, but that will all clear up as we go further into consciousness raising, I believe.
Okay. And I will say, Stanton Friedman, I've spoke to him a few times. I'm going to get him on. Lovely guy, really nice guy. He's
a great guy. I've dubbed him the Don Quixote of ufology, because he's been tilting at windmills for such a long time.
That's true, man. That's true, and he's been through quite a bit personally as well, just not too long ago. So I know he's a good guy. He's a good guy, and there's lots of people like him as well. Okay, well. We're going to get into Project Serpo here. That's one of your books, which is you've got two fascinating books. And just before we begin, I believe there's a third book as well about to come out.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
So congratulations on that. And that will be out roughly when?
The book is completed. I'll be working with the editor next, probably beginning next month, and then I believe it'll be published. It'll be published in late fall or early spring of 2017.
Okay. Now, just before we get into Serpo, actually something's come to my mind that I think we just need to cover two things, really, is the bad guys and the good guys. When we talk about bad and good in this sense, first of all, how many species would you say are interacting with planet Earth right now?
According to Anonymous, who released the Serpo information, 8 at that time, which was 2005, when he first started sending in his emails to the website. So as of 2005, he claimed that we were interacting with 8.
Okay, but there could be more.
I think at this point it's appreciably more.
Right. And what do we class as good and bad? I know David Icke talks about, the reptilians, and others do as well now, have taken on this truth as well, and it seems to be the case that they do not have our best intentions. But what is a good intention versus a bad intention?
Well, we have to continue to talk about the reptilians. I think David Icke opened it up, and it's a very important subject, and I've addressed it at length in my new book. When we talk about bad guys, we're talking about people who perhaps want to take over the planet, and I think that would qualify them as being bad guys. The good guys are probably our friends in the galaxy who would like to see us grow in stature and spirituality and join the Galactic Federation eventually. And there are several such civilizations that would like to see that happen, and who are helping us in certain ways that are not obvious, through perhaps education and influence, but who are non-interventionist. But the reptilians are very much interventionist.
Yes, okay. And there may be other bad guys, if we could class them like that, that would not with our best interests at hearts out there as well. But the reptilians is obviously one that we know that's.
And I think the thing that should be stressed about the reptilians is this: they are not interlopers. They're not new. They were here before we were. They feel and they believe that they own this planet for that reason, and that we are the Johnny-come-latelys. Okay.
Right.
However, that is not the case, because other civilizations have helped to bring us here and to help us start our civilization here.
And you think that you would have thought, though, wouldn't you, that being eons in front of us, in a sense, with not just technology but time as well, that you would always be going forward to spiritually progress yourself, as some of these other species have done, and you would have thought that maybe they have a different understanding, even to our knowledge of the nature of the soul as well.
You would expect that. You would, of course. However, that particular species, from what I'm gathering and what I've learned and what I've studied, they do not progress. In fact, their DNA has not changed over millennia. Their DNA has remained static for hundreds of thousands of years. So we're dealing with an entirely different kind of civilization when we deal with the civilization.
That's very, very interesting what you're saying. You're connecting a lot of dots there. That's very interesting, that is, Len. Okay. I mean, I'm desperate to get on, but there's just to lay this basic stuff down here as well. And again, those with not the greatest intention probably did help out, the Nazis in World War II potentially.
There was a connection.
Yeah.
From my research, the reptilians were really behind the ascendancy of the Nazi organization. They helped them with technology. They helped them with many things.
Do you think some of the races interacting with us actually remember their past life connection with us, or their future life connections with us, where they can see their soul lineage, and they're helping that particular aspect of themselves progress in ways that we don't understand, because it's helping them progress or heal?
I think they're anxious for us to join their ranks. I'll put it that way. Whether or not there's any DNA connection, yes, there is a DNA connection, of course, because they contributed their DNA to creating us. So that's the connection, and so they're rooting for us. Yes, absolutely.
Well, if we can channel and connect with these beings that have a different outlook on life and spirituality, then I wonder what powers they have to channel higher dimensional levels, and what knowledge they have brought through. Makes you think, doesn't it?
If we're talking about the Pleiadians, they're many thousands of years ahead of us, and they are really our distant relatives, probably the most noteworthy. But we really are, the entire human race in this galaxy is descended from a civilization on Lyra. The civilization on Lyra. We've all scattered to different solar systems and different star systems from Lyra, but we're all related, basically.
Okay. All right, Project Serpo. This is where it gets really, really interesting. Now, my notes are all over the place here right now. I do apologize. Okay, now Project Serpo, as far as you're concerned, is a true documented case. Documented from whistleblowers, shall we say? It's a planet. Now, hope I get this right. It's about 39 light years away. Is that right, from planet Earth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, 39 light years.
Okay, and that's the Zeta Reticuli star system. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it potentially takes about 10 months to journey there with the technology that these Ebens use to go back and forth with. And just remind us, who are the Eben race?
Well, we gave them that name. The Ebens are from Zeta Reticuli, and they were the ones that crashed at Roswell. And in that crash, 5 aliens died and 1 survived. And it was because 1 survived that we were able to make this agreement with them to do the exchange program. If they had all died, that never would have happened.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's the connection, right? Okay, well, that would, in lineage, make some sort of sense as well. And just to put into perspective how far away it is, 39 light years from our solar system is about 240,000 trillion miles.
Yeah, it's 240 trillion, right, exactly.
Yeah.
240 trillion miles.
Oh, sorry, 240 trillion miles. Sorry, yeah. My math is wrong there. Sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, putting a few zeros there. Okay, cool. All right. Now, just very quickly, where did this what whistleblower brought this information through regarding the Serpo case?
It was released by former executives of the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. And for those of you who don't know the origins of the DIA, it was started in the early 60s by President Kennedy and John McNamara. Kennedy was having problems with the CIA, as many people know, and had sworn to break them up into 1,000 pieces because of what had happened at how he felt they had treated him with regard to Bay of Pigs. And so he and McNamara decided they needed a new intelligence organization. That became the DIA. And it was a DIA that was put in charge of the Serpo program. And that was because it was Kennedy's choice, and he chose the DIA. And they have all the information, and the person that released the information in 2005 was a former highly placed executive with the DIA. Anonymous.
Okay. Has any other exchange programs taken place since Serpo, Project Serpo?
The Ebens have been back at least 9 times that we know of since the exchange program. The last one was at Johnston Island in the mid-Pacific in 2010, I believe. And as far as other exchange programs, I'm not aware of them. There probably have been many others, several others at least, with other civilizations. But that's the only one that I'm familiar with. Okay,
just sort of walk us through this exchange program, how this took place. Who were these astronauts that went on the mission? What were we? Why did this take place? In the sense of what were we transferring one from the other? What were we getting in going, and what were they getting in taking us?
Well, we knew their technology was way ahead of ours. We knew they had anti-gravity technology. They had the ability to get here in the first place, which we didn't in 1964. So we potentially could learn a tremendous amount of information from them. So it was in our best interest, of course, to go ahead with the exchange program. And that was the reason it was approved. It was approved by Eisenhower. He was the one that was in presidency at the time we made the first arrangement, but then Kennedy was the one that had to give the go-ahead in 1963, and he was the one that said, go ahead with this. And of course, by the time it took place, he was dead, and Johnson had to be consulted about it, and he said, sure, go ahead with it. I don't think it'll ever happen anyway. So we did.
And who were these particular candidates that got chosen? Because they couldn't. There surely would have been no ties with families here or any other. I mean, how were they not missed?
The selection process. One of the main criteria of the selection process was that they have no known relatives, children, wives, husbands, whatever, and so that was one of the major purposes of this thing, was to make sure that they were not connected in any way. And it was a very difficult selection process, actually. Ads were put in military journals and newspapers all over the country asking for volunteers. They were not told in that ad exactly what they would be getting into. When they were selected, they were told it would be a moon journey, not an interstellar travel. So they were very carefully chosen. Out of I think 600 volunteers, 16 were selected. They were not astronauts. These were not trained as astronauts. They were simply, the only criteria was that they be part of the military. That's all, in any branch of the military, because we wanted people who had military discipline, because they would need it on this particular adventure. And then they went through their training program at the CIA training facility in Virginia.
Right. Okay. And were these were there as many women as there were men? I mean, was it all just one sex or the other, or?
Anonymous tells us that of the 12 that were selected, 2 were women. However, that has been contradicted by several others. I think what happened was this. I think that there were 2 women in the first cut of 16, that is 12 plus 4 alternates, but they were cut when the final 12 were selected. So the women were not on this trip. It was strictly 12 men. I'm pretty convinced of that.
What were the Ebens getting out of having us journey with them back home?
They claim that they had been watching us and our progress for many, many years, perhaps several thousand years. They were kindly disposed towards us. They themselves were only interested in biochemical science. Their hardware was far in advance of anything we had. They were just friendly, really, and they were watching us. They were observing us, and when we finally discovered them because of the crash at Roswell, they said, "Okay, fine, let's be friends." That's essentially what happened. And they suggested the exchange program initially. So at that point, Eisenhower agreed to it, and then Kennedy said, "Go ahead with it."
So when you think of the Ebens at the Roswell crash, I mean, there was the confusion in myself, in the sense that these beings were robotic in a sense. They weren't. They were not conscious. But that would, from what we're talking about here, the Ebens are a conscious being. They're not controlled by something else.
Yes, they are. But however, we discovered when we got there that they have a police state. They exist, and their civilization is basically a police state. But they're not robotic in any sense of the term, no. But they are totally controlled. They are totally controlled by an elite on their planet, perhaps who are more educated than the rank and file.
Oh, right. And who was this elite? What species were these?
No, they were the same species. However, one of our people discovered. At first, we didn't think they were able to speak English. We had one female Eben. By the way, let me just explain how they got the term Eben. They were given that name as a shortening of extraterrestrial biological entity. That's how it happened. We don't know what they call themselves, but we call them Ebens, and so that name remained. We found out that they all were very intelligent, basically, as a species, and we estimated their IQ to be around 160, in terms of our measurements. But they were totally controlled, and they wore a device on their belts that they observed that they had to respond to. They would be told what to do basically for every hour of the day. So while they were highly intelligent, that intelligence was channeled by an elite.
Isn't that interesting? Okay. What was the terrain like there? What was the planet like? What was the sky like, in a sense? Suns? Was there a sun? Two suns?
There were two suns in the sky, but the planet only revolved around one of those suns. But it was a binary star system. Zeta Reticuli too was a binary star system. But because there were two suns in the sky, there was no darkness. There was one of the suns was always casting its light on the planet, but it revolved only around one of those Zeta Reticuli stars. This planet was very much like ours. It was a little smaller. The terrain was very similar. It was extremely hot in the equatorial region, and so hot that our people had to live underground for the first 6 years. They just couldn't take the heat. For the final 7 years of their sojourn there, they were allowed to go and live in the northern hemisphere of the planet, which was much cooler. And the Ebens built them their own community up there, and it was much more comfortable for that final segment of their journey.
Right. Okay. What about supplies for food? I mean, what did the Ebens survive on? I mean, how did they get their food?
They had agriculture. They used the type of agriculture that we now do. We now grow under lights, but they did grow their own food there. Absolutely, it was not a problem.
And there was also the Eben energy device, the crystal rectangle, is it?
That's a whole subject in itself, and I devoted an entire appendix to that. That was their power source. We brought with us, our people brought with us many electrical devices and sources of batteries and so forth. But we found ultimately that we could use their crystal rectangle for all the power needs that we had, and that we were able to power everything that we had with their device. It's called the crystal rectangle. It had to do with antimatter technology, and it's very complicated. Although it seemed to be simple, it was really very complicated.
Okay. And did obviously some of these people returned back to planet Earth. How many returned? How many passed away during the time over there as well?
12 people left. 7 returned. 3 died. 1 on the way to Serpo, 2 on Serpo, and then 2 decided to remain there. And we said, sure, if you want to stay there, go ahead. And as far as we know, we were still in contact with those 2 until 1988. After that, we lost touch with them.
Oh my gosh. And how old were these people when they left? I mean, were these young people?
I think basically they were young. Yes, they were all military, active military. Except for the commander. The commander, I believe, was at the level of. He was not a retiree, but he was no longer directly in the military. He was a senior person, perhaps in his late 30s or early 40s. The others were most likely in their 20s.
Yeah. So okay. But there is the feeling in the community that. Yeah, as you've said before, that other exchange programs have taken place as well.
Oh yeah, at this point, definitely. In fact, I wouldn't at all be surprised that whether or not I haven't found this out definitely or not, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out that there is still a human colony on Serpo. I'm almost sure there is.
Wow. Okay. What was that's an interesting one actually. The religious belief of the Ebens.
Well, they were similar in many ways. They did not talk about God. They talked about a creator, but they did believe in an entity more powerful than their civilization. And it may be that the elite did not have those beliefs, but the rank and file, they did have beliefs in that. And they had rituals and ceremonies for death and for birth, very much like we do.
Right. I mean, what is the implications of this exchange program? I mean, if this has been taking place, how could this ever come out? How could this this huge secret ever get out or be leaked out to be told as a truth, except for through an anonymous source that initially brought the Serpo to some people's attention?
That's the only way it could come out, because the information is contained in a briefing document. It's really a book, 3,000 pages long, and that book is in a vault at Bolling Air Force Base, and none of that information has been revealed. If it hadn't been for Anonymous, this would not have been known. If he hadn't revealed this information online, we would not know anything about it, because while the DIA had no problem releasing it, the CIA continued to want it covered up. And the CIA has more power in this connection.
What's the most interesting aspect of the Serpo story for you?
The technology was amazing. We definitely learned a lot in terms of technology, and I'm sure we have that technology already, especially as regards biochemistry. They were cloning, they were doing DNA experimentation way in advance of anything we had. We didn't even know what DNA was in 1965. It really had just been discovered only a few years earlier by Watson and Crick, and but they were creating creatures that were combinations that were, some of them were horrific. And when we got to see what they were doing, we thought they were evil. To them, it was just science. To us, it was evil.
Okay. And is there any other aspects of the Serpo? I mean, you've done this book, this wonderful book, and I mean, I hope I'm doing it some justice by some of the things that I've discussed with yourself. But is there anything sort of, was there any sort of aha moments or sort of like things that really stood out when bringing this material together?
Well, the thing that perhaps impressed me the most was the fact that they were very friendly and very kind to us. They had none of the characteristics that we now ascribe to the reptilians, so they were totally not related to that particular civilization. And they have been helpful to us in many, many ways. I think that a lot of our technology today is a result of that exchange program.
Well,
especially as regards
Roswell, yeah.
DNA.
Okay. Well, and then there's the Roswell aspect as well, where Philip Corso, and the cabinet at the Pentagon, where certain things were reverse engineered, or as best they could be understood at that time, and even now is probably as best they can be understood. But certain technologies came from reverse engineering the debris from the Roswell crash. Infrared, night vision, optics,
Kevlar,
Kevlar,
night vision, many things,
and many things,
computer technology, chips.
Yes, there's
they advanced our computer technology tremendously.
Yeah. Are they
now? I will say that Corso's first reaction, there were human body parts found on the crashed Roswell disk, and that made Corso believed that they ate human flesh, that they were cannibalistic, and that they were not here to help us. But it turned out that they simply collected body parts from wherever they went in the galaxy, and they brought them back to their planet and studied them. So there was no implication that they were eating humans. But Corso seemed to think so. And in his book, did you read his book?
I have. I'm interviewing his son in December in Florida. Yeah.
He warned us that we should be prepared to perhaps consider them as enemies. because of the fact that the human body parts were found on the crash Roswell craft. But it turned out to be nothing other than a scientific interest.
Okay, that's very interesting. I'll ask his son about that when I do the interview in Florida. Definitely. Thank you for that. It's part of their mission to go out there in the universe and seed life.
I don't know about seeding life. I know that they're studying life wherever they find it. They themselves had been involved in a very long-term war with another civilization on another planet, and it was I understand it to have been a 100-year war in terms of our time measurements of time, and that's why the military became so powerful on Serpo, because of the fact that they had been at war, and they had developed some very, very potent weapons, and some of that weapon technology we now know about, and we have learned about, and so have the Russians, by the way. Particle beam weapons. So, but they're basically a peaceful civilization. They are not warlike. They do not abduct, unlike the Greys, and they have become our friends, and they're a vital ally in the galaxy at this point.
Right. So just to clear that up as well, the Greys were nothing to do with the Roswell crash.
Nothing whatever.
Right. Okay.
Nothing whatever.
Okay. Even though they look a bit similar.
Well, they claim to be from Zeta Reticuli also, but
okay.
I view them as really native to the reptilian civilization on this planet.
How there has been talk that we were, as a species, we were improved in some ways, and given an evolutionary jump in our DNA, what would have took a lot longer for us to get to the being this, the Homo sapien, I think it's called. Probably got it wrong, but you know what I mean. That we were genetically altered. Had there been any talks of any races genetically altering the Ebens and giving them a push in their evolutionary timeline, in a sense, or was it through, as far as we know, a natural process of millions of years to get where they've got?
No, you mean have we helped them in that regard?
No, who helped them? Did anyone help them to get where they are now? The Ebens.
Well, they're part of the galaxy. The galaxy has thousands and thousands of civilizations all over the place. So they are what they are. They are where they are and what they are. We didn't help them in any way.
No. I'm not saying we helped them. I'm saying, was there any talk of any other species helping them get to the point where they've got to?
Oh, I see. No, not that I know of. But I want to also, before we leave the subject, I just want to make the point that our anti-gravity technology, we have largely them to thank for that. In my book, you may have gotten to the chapter on Kingman.
Mm-hmm.
They sent a disk here for us to study and to reverse engineer. They gave it to us as a gift in 1953. And I have a lot of information about that in my book.
Did they wish for that disc to that reverse engineering of that disc to get into the public arena? Did they want it to become mainstream, or were they happy that the global elites, would have took that technology and siphoned it off to some black project somewhere?
They had no interest in that. That was up to us, really. They were giving it to our military, basically. Right. It was back engineered at the Nevada test site beginning in 1953, and by 1962, we had a working flying saucer. And shortly thereafter, we also had sent groups to Mars and to the Moon
as a secret space program.
Secret space program, right?
Yeah. Of course, to the mainstream, none of this exists. Obviously, it's never been seen in their reality, and it never will be seen, and that we're just crackpot for discussing such subjects. But there does seem to be a lot of evidence pointing to the contrary of that, especially in the work that you've done to dig out such evidence as well. And how how would you help anyone that would struggle with this subject to think that there's any reality to it? What would you say to them?
Well, to begin with, we can talk about Spielberg's movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, that final scene where we see 12 Americans in orange jumpsuits boarding an alien craft, that was the whole story in one scene, because Spielberg had all the information. He knew all about it. Who gave it to him exactly, I'm not sure. I do know he wrote the screenplay in one weekend in a hotel in New York. So he had it all put together. And it's a fact that it did happen.
Yes, that would not surprise me actually. That they would give someone like him the basic picture for him then to allow.
My own feeling about that is that the information was given to him by Anonymous at that point, not by the aliens.
No, absolutely.
I think
that's what I meant.
They knew of Spielberg's interest in science fiction. He had made that very clear in previous efforts that other movies he'd made. So they knew that they were giving it to the right person. They knew he would do the right thing with it, and that's why I think Anonymous revealed it to him in 1977.
Yes, absolutely.
And finally, yes.
Absolutely, because what happened then was, by giving it to someone like him, it gets it into the mainstream psyche.
Exactly.
If anything was ever revealed in the future that was out of their control, well, guess what? You already knew about it anyway, and you've already accepted it as potential truth as well.
Right.
So if it did happen, it wouldn't be a culture shock as such. It would be like, oh, well, we've always believed that, we've always been told there was, there's these movies that we've always watched that have indoctrinated us to be okay with that framework of reality.
Yeah, the subject of science fiction is a subject all in itself. We have to talk really about George Lucas and about Roddenberry. I mean, there are many, many offshoots to that subject.
Well, they say that Roddenberry was working with channelers that brought that information through.
Yes, he was, exactly. And so was Lucas.
Oh, you think he was?
Absolutely, absolutely. Star Wars was a very, very revealing work. And Lucas knows the story. There's no question in my mind.
Well, when you think of the Force, and then if you take the Force and change the word for consciousness, yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly.
The nature of the soul and the power within, yeah, absolutely, very, very, very possible.
Not only that, but the whole subject of the Death Star. Death Stars actually do exist. The reptilians have that technology. So he was making that also available in public, which was very important.
That's very, very interesting. Okay. Okay, and again, as you've said, the Ebens have always been in our history, and what we mistook for angels or gods of the past were actually them as ancient astronauts and potentially other species as well.
No, if we want to talk about angels, we have to talk about multidimensionality. We're living in a multidimensional universe, and when we talk about the angelic kingdom, that's a whole different story. The Ebens are simply another civilization on another planet, that's all.
Okay.
And we were lucky to have made that contact with them and to get all the help that we've gotten from them. And what we've learned about how to travel to distant stars. As you may know, Ben Rich. Do you know who Ben Rich was? The president of Lockheed Martin.
No, I do not know.
He said in his alumni speech at the University of California that we now have the ability to travel to the stars. Anything you can imagine, we can already do. So if he knew that in 1989. Then imagine what we know today.
Yeah, yes, I've heard that speech actually. Oh, that was him, was it? Right? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they knew that then. What do they know now? Yeah, and what the technology we have in our hands, right now, these little computers, that's probably nothing compared to what's really out there as technology in the black that's been siphoned from the black budgets of different governments.
When you think about that, it only took 10 months to travel to a planet that was 240 trillion miles away, then you know that technology of traveling through wormholes, if we learned that information on that trip in 1965, imagine what we have today.
Yes, absolutely. And when you just touched on interdimensional beings, yeah, from other realities, I know we're not talking about the Ebens there, of course, but then we're talking about some other nature of reality that's out there in the framework that we don't understand. That's
Exactly.
also potentially interacting with us, and maybe
Exactly.
interacting with the Ebens and interacting with other species. And they probably, do you think the Ebens have visitations from beings higher than them, as in the interdimensional realms?
It wouldn't surprise me at all. However, the only species that I'm aware of from my research that has that ability now are the reptilians. They can go back and forth from the fourth to the third dimension easily. In fact, they're more at home in the fourth dimension. So there's a lot to learn there.
What the heck is the fourth dimension here? What kind of nature of framework is that?
Well, you might call it the realm of the dead.
Where the soul potentially, yeah.
Well, I mean, when people die, they really pass over to another dimension.
Well,
And
it was
so-
interesting that, because when Jane Roberts, when someone was asked to draw a picture of the entity that Jane Roberts was channeling, they drew a grey almost.
Exactly, and that's because they have that capability. That's how they're able to take the abductees through walls and through windows with ease.
But then the information that came through Jane Roberts was only loving and empowering. There was nothing negative about that information.
I don't have a lot of information about Jane Roberts.
The Seth material we were referring to here.
Oh, the Seth material, yeah. I don't know too much about that, actually, but I know that the reptilians and the Greys have their own agenda. That's all I can say at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it was something like that Jane was bringing through from another dimension, and yeah, it was very loving, and it only had our best interest at heart.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. Okay, I'll have to get familiar with that information. I don't have it.
Well, this was back some time now, but it's the material carries on. I only mentioned that because of the person that drew the portrait at the time of what they saw that Jane was bringing through, and it was that kind of that kind of shape, and it was just it made you really think. Well, is our understanding of the whole UFO phenomena completely skewed, and actually there's a much bigger nature of reality behind that.
Exactly, and there is, I believe.
Yeah, which is what we said earlier on. Okay, is there anything that you might like to add in this interview as well?
Well, I think the Serpo story needs to be known and understood and be out there. As I said, it's sitting in a 3,000-page debriefing book at Bolling Air Force Base in Washington. I think it should be out there, and Anonymous said so. Anyone who knows anything about it thinks that it's harmless information that we should know about. And it would help all of us to raise our consciousness to understand it, and to know that we have friends in the galaxy that we're trading scientific information with, and that we are trading biological information with, biochemical information with. There's no harm in letting us know this. However, the powers that be just do not want us to have it. And if it hadn't been for Anonymous, we would not know about it today.
Yes, absolutely. Where do you see the direction of the whole UFO? I don't really know what the right word is here, but the sort of drive that the UFO, the direction that the UFO sort of understanding is going into as well. And are people going to keep bringing out the same books, or is there a new depth to this that's going to be revealed to us?
Well, we've gone a long, long way past looking at lights in the sky. We're way past that now. Now we're dealing with extraterrestrial civilizations, and books about those civilizations are what we need to get into now and understand our relationship with them, where we stand on a spiritual level, how far more advanced are they than we. These are the things we need to learn about now. As far as the technology and the spacefaring technology, we already have that. We can travel among the stars. We know about many civilizations already in the star system Sirius, Canis Major. So that's old history now. Now we need to understand what the effects this has on our consciousness and how it can help our consciousness evolve, and how we can become a Star Trek civilization, very much like the way Gene Roddenberry portrayed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And how can people support you?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I mean, is there any? Obviously, you've got a website.
I have. Right now, my website is down. I'm redoing it.
Oh, right. Okay.
It was et-secrethistory.com for several years, but now I've taken it off, and I'm going to be putting out a new one when my new book gets released this fall. And it'll be really designed around the new book. But there's no need to support me. Just support the direction that the human race is heading in, and hopefully it's in the right direction, because there are still many threats to our civilization.
And that's not from outside; that's from within.
Exactly, from within.
That's from within. Yes. What advice have you heard from any races out there in the nature of what we could do to improve ourselves in the moment now, in a sense? What are they doing different that we've not caught on to?
Well, in order to answer that question, we have to understand how the human race was created. And according to my research, it was created only 40,000 years ago, what we call Homo sapiens. And the question is, how soon and how quickly can we reach a level of consciousness that will allow us to become a factor in advancing civilization in the galaxy, which is really what we have to do. We have to take a role in that. And we can't do that until we have perfected our spacefaring technology, we've identified our friends and identified our enemies, and we've developed the ability to be loving and creatures who take care of each other. And once we've reached that point, we will become a major factor in this galaxy.
Right. What keeps you going doing this work?
Well, it just seems to me that it needs to be done. That's the best way I can put it. And if somebody else chooses to do it better, that's fine with me. However it gets out there.
Well, Len Kasten, just thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure, Kevin. I've enjoyed talking with you.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on our past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.